Welcome to the newest X Corner. I'm here once again to add a little mutation to the superhero crew. I'll be covering the X comics for the week of December 13th, 2017. This week we have 5 comics. AllNew Wolverine 28, Cable 152, Jean Grey 10, Weapon X 12, and XMen Blue 17. And this week especially, there's some major spoilers, so beware. We'll start with AllNew Wolverine 28. The writer was Tom Taylor, and the artist was Juan Cabal. This is part 4 of the Orphans of X storyline, where Laura, aka X-23, aka the AllNew Wolverine, her younger sister, Gabby, who's a clone, and Dakin, her sort of half-brother, but I guess since she's a clone of Wolverine, he'd be more like her son, but let's not dwell too long on that, are being hunted by the Orphans of X, who are people hurt by the Wolverine family in some way, usually with pointy claws. In this chapter, the orphans have gotten hold of a sword that could kill those with healing factors. This sword was broken, so they forged the pieces into bullets. Laura and the crew escape to Japan to meet with the creator of the sword, to see if he could help them. He says he can, and they begin a ritual to craft something that will protect them, hopefully. Meanwhile, the orphans have kidnapped Lady Deathstrike, Sabretooth, and Old Man Logan. Then they just execute them. I have a feeling that it's a ruse of some kind. AllNew Wolverine has always been one of the best X titles, even in the past few years of the dark times. Gabby is an amazing new character, and she's a little girl who has a pet Wolverine and can't feel pain. And in this issue, she's even given a code name by Dakin, Honey Badger. And it's at this point where there's a splash panel showing many of the old Wolverine covers reimagined as Honey Badger covers. Really great stuff. As for the things that irk me, that age-old question of continuity is creeping in. As I said last episode, Dakin is coming to cause Iceman trouble in his book, but here he seems to be getting a redemption arc. It's a nitpick, but there it is. Also, the shock ending of Deathstrike, Sabretooth, and Logan getting turned into pulp by a single bullet was excessive, and such an obvious misdirection that it felt very cheap. We'll see where it goes. Maybe this whole series has been another alternative Marvel universe this whole time. I give it a rating of 9 out of 10. Next we have Cable 152. The writer is Ed Brisson, and John Mallon is the artist. This is the Newer Mutants Chapter 3, and Cable is trying to stop someone from murdering a bunch of immortal mutants called Eternals in the past. He's like a sort of time cop. He's pulled together a ragtag group from different times to help him, including Armor, X-23, Dupe, Longshot, and Shatterstar. The group go to where Gideon's body is being held. He's one of the Eternals. He was nearly drained to death by another Eternal named Selene, who's like a vampire. But they run up against Gideon's robot assistants, and a bunch of psychics that he has there working for him. And then Gideon himself from the future shows up. It's like Murder on the Orient Express, just with immortal time travelers. That's about all that happened. I can't say I'm really enjoying this series so far, but I do like Dupe and Armor. She's an interesting new X-Man who's stuck around and been successful. It's a rare thing these days. The problem with this comic is the plot. It just isn't going anywhere that interesting. The Eternals were a Rob Liefeld invention back around X-Force's debut, and I guess they're going for a nostalgia feel here with this comic. But that was the era where I saw the downfall of the classic X period and the beginning of the bad times. It's where I dropped off the line for 10 years or so. It's just a miss for me, so far. But I'll keep reading just to find out what the hell is going on. 5 out of 10. Then we have Jean Grey number 10, with Dennis Hopeless as the writer and Alberto Albuquerque as the artist. And the whole series of this younger time-displaced Jean Grey has been about her training to fight the Phoenix, so that she wouldn't become its next avatar. And in this issue, the fight is on. Jean is helped by the ghost of her older self, Emma Frost, the Stepford Cuckoos, Hope, and Quentin Quire, as they try to stand up against the big fiery bird, but they all get swatted down. In the end, the ghost of Jean Grey pleads for the Phoenix to leave the younger Jean alone, since she's not strong enough to contain its essence, only for the big bird to say it knows, before turning the younger Jean to ash. Yeah, it killed Jean. I think this one might be for realsies. The next issue is the last, and this issue leads directly into the Phoenix Resurrection miniseries. And that's where we might be getting the return of the older Jean Grey to this side of life, so we'll have to see. I've really enjoyed this series more than I thought I would. Jean Grey, especially the younger one, has never been one of my favorites, but this series has really humanized her and taken us on a journey that I'm sad to see end. You knew it was all leading to this Phoenix Resurrection storyline. The end of this issue offered a rare what-the-f moment for me. The art wasn't great, however. I like what Albuquerque has done in the past, but this issue seemed a little rushed. Probably to get it out before that Phoenix Resurrection storyline. Also, there wasn't enough Quentin Quire for my liking. He only had one quippy line, I think. I'm sad to see the younger Jean go out, but curious to see what's next. Rating 8 out of 10. Next is Weapon X12. Its writer is Greg Pak, and wait till I destroy this name. Yildireyh Cinar is the artist. This issue is the beginning of a new arc called Nuke-Clear War. Get it? Nuke-Clear War. And has Weapon X team, Old Man Logan, Warpath, Domino, Lady Deathstrike, and Sabretooth, very conveniently getting into a fight against a whole army of nukes, who are killing mutants in a nondescript South American dictatorship. Nuke was a super soldier who took drugs to get stronger, and he even makes an appearance at the end to create the most bloodthirsty buddy movie with Sabretooth. Now, it might seem like I'm crapping on this comic, but it isn't that bad. It's just a lot of mindless fun, and excuses for the Weapon Xers to do killy things. Nothing too deep here, but it looks good, and it does what it says in the box. So this Weapon X series started with our group being hunted, so they had to band together to fight the bad guys who were after them. Well, they sort of did that, and now for no discernible reason, they're still hanging out. Now I can see the first three kicking around, of Domino, Wolverine, and, Logan, sorry, and Warpath, because they're all X-Men. But why is Lady Deathstrike and Sabretooth sticking around? I have no idea. Like I said, mindless action, but I'm not sure how long I'll stick with it, if it's going to be like that the whole time. We'll have to see. I give it a 6 out of 10. Lastly, we have XMen Blue number 17 by Cullen Bunn and R.B. Silva as the artist. The XMen Blue team consisted of the younger version of the X-Men, Wolverine's son, and a vampiric storm from alternate dimensions. And I wonder how Jean's death in her own comic is going to affect this one. So far, not at all. Anyway, they seem to be having time travel issues. Their world is changing and unraveling because they haven't been back in time, like they're time displaced. It's very confusing. So now it's having effects in the present, and now they've gone to the future of the X-Men of 2099. It's the book from the 90s. And that's where they found themselves the last issue facing off with those guys. So they meet these new future X-Men, and they see how screwed up the future is, seemingly thanks to them. And then they jump back through time again, only to find themselves back at the X-Mansion, but in the time of the Generation X series, with that old team facing them about to attack. This series has been one of the weaker X-books for me, only because it seems like these poor kids are always the reason for the bad stuff happening around them. I'm sure I would have enjoyed returning to the X-Men 29 world if I had read that comic, and by most accounts I didn't miss anything by skipping it, but this issue left me flat. I don't even have a reference to know if the 29 future shown here was the original comic or changed due to the time problems these kids are having. I think that's probably what's happened, but can't tell. Same with the next issue. I never read Generation X. It was in my 10-year hiatus I mentioned earlier. So I don't know how much of this next issue I'll get either. Not much good to say, I'm afraid. It looked good, I guess. 4 out of 10. Sorry to end on a downer, and this whole week wasn't great, but hopefully we'll get a resurgence next week in the X Corner. Bye-bye.